Okay, so welcome to what is self-pleasure and what is a self-pleasure practice. Um, I'm so happy to have you guys here. And if you're watching the replay, I'm excited that you tapped in to see what this was about. So in the field of sexuality, we do have the self-pleasure practice. And what I'm going to talk to you a little bit about is taking the concept of the self-pleasure practice and taking it and going a little bit deeper. So the self-pleasure practice can be seen as a nervous system regulation practice. And if we think about our typical day, we primarily go through the day very like driven by our mind. What do I need to get done? And it's almost like our head is kind of like leading us through the day. And when we're in a day that is very fast paced and it's going, our body, we don't have time to necessarily stop to listen to our body. And our body is not necessarily communicating at all to our mind as to what's going on. And we're just blindly following our mind throughout the day and pushing down really any sensations and feelings that arise because we have to keep going on with our day, right? So because of that, we lead our life with our mind and we're not really attuned to the sensations of our body. We can't really hear our body's language and we're not listening to our body. On top of that, our nervous system, our ability to feel the sensations in our body and to stay with our sensations in our body. I'm going to switch this to gallery because there we go. And our ability to stay with our sensations in our body has to do with our nervous system's capacity to feel sensations. So if you've ever had like a super stressful moment, you'll notice that you're in your mind trying to solve the problem. And you're constantly like, okay, well, what am I going to do? I can do this X, Y, Z. I can go down this path and then I can go down this path. And oh my gosh, wait a minute. Let me see if I can go down this path. And so we're constantly, and that's a big indicator that you're not in your body when you're in your mind and you're trying to solve the problem in this way. And that's because your body has a hard time at that moment holding and feeling the sensations that are in your body. So it's like immediately it goes through the head, like to try to figure it out. And so by practicing and doing the self-pleasure practice, you increase the capacity to feel in your body and you increase the capacity to like stay in your body to feel these sensations in your body. So not only are you like learning your body's language, but you're also increasing your nervous system's capacity. And what's interesting, and this is something that's been talked about before also, which is very well known, is that we don't have the capacity necessarily to hold a large amount of pleasure in our body. And that's because we don't have a lot of capacity to really hold anything in our body because we're constantly in our mind. And so like any sort of practice or any sort of meditation, right? The self-pleasure modality is there to like interrupt what's, your normal pattern of your life. And it's there to kind of like dive right in and, create a diversion as to what is happening in your daily life and to kind of mix things up and to reprogram things. So one common side effect of starting the practice, if you practice regularly, like 30 minutes a day is the suggested time. So one common, one piece that will often show up, because I've been working with some men and they start crying. And they're like, I don't want, what's wrong with me? I'm crying all the time. I'm like, it's okay. Like let's just let this come up and let's see what happens next. And then the next week there was like a lot of anger that came up and it was like, oh, there's something wrong with me because there's all this anger that's coming up. And so again, it's like, it's disrupting the normal pattern that you have. It's taking you out of your mind and into your body so that you can feel more sensations in your body and feel more pieces in your body. So it's taking us like so that we can lead with the body, and reprogramming us so that we can lead with the body and not with the mind. Because in order for us to induce change, we need to induce the change from our body. We can't bring about change in our life from the mind. It has to come from the body. So by connecting in this way and expanding your nervous system to feel the sensations and hold the sensations in your body, you know, you are able to lead more with your body and your mind. And, you know, it's different from masturbation, self-pleasure, because self-pleasure is not goal orientated. So with masturbation, we'll sit down and it's like, okay, I'm going to masturbate, I'm going to have an orgasm, and it's very like goal focused. So self-pleasure is not goal focused. So you can sit down and you can start in one avenue and start with one sensation and start with one feeling, and then you could end up feeling something completely different 30 minutes later. And so it's about showing up for yourself and giving yourself that time in those 30 minutes to stay there on your mat or on your space for those 30 minutes. And, you know, continually showing up for yourself, continually bringing yourself back to your body, and continually asking your body, okay, what do I need now? What's coming up now? And as you develop and as you work with the practice, it's really amazing to see how you can start to identify patterns in your patterns that, you know, you have, whether they're like limiting belief patterns or just coping mechanisms that your body might have to disconnect while you're trying to go deeper into your body. You'll notice perhaps like how quickly you might go back to your mind, and then you're like in a sensation. It's like, oh, this is feeling really good. And then all of a sudden you're like thinking about what to make for dinner. And you're like, oh my gosh, what happened? Like, I need to go. That was really fast. Like that happened. And so that's a disconnect. And you can see when you know, do the practice every day, you can start to see how quickly, you know, you can pick up on these different patterns. Which are all unconscious patterns, which we all have to protect ourselves throughout the day. So I'm gonna kind of divide this up into a few different parts. That's the brief introduction. I'm gonna stop there, and then I'll ask questions, and then I'm gonna kind of go into like different types and how we can kind of design the self-pleasure practice around different, you know, different things throughout the day. So does anyone have any questions right now about what I just said, or did it bring anything up? Feel free to unmute or ask. Nothing?
I've got something. I'm curious about like in general, like with people, myself and let's say clients, if they've got like a go-to pattern of self-pleasuring, you know, maybe they just go straight for the wank or the whatever, you know, and now they're doing that 30 minutes a day. Like, I can see how that can be like not really great for their practice. So how to disrupt that? Like, what do you do? Do you try to do new things, or do you try to explore different sensations, or do you just go with what's pleasurable? Because I feel like going with what's pleasurable could be the trap, you know?
Right. And especially with people who are like addicted to masturbating and things like that. And it's like, that's where the sensation is, and they don't know where the sensations are and what feels pleasurable in other parts of their body. So that's a perfect segue to the next part that I'm going to talk about, which is like different types. Cool. So what I would do with that situation would be to write out a specific self-pleasure practice for them so that they can like have it, and they can print it out and they can use it. So there's a few different types of things that you can do. I'll go with the first. Okay, so let's go back to what we were talking about with like how our mind like leads us through the day, right? So like, okay, we're going about the day, our mind is leading us through the day, and you know, you get this like message from this person like out of the blue, and it just like, it's really rude. It's somebody from the past. It totally disrupts your flow. And it really like messes with you. And you can like, you notice you start to get attached in your mind, and your ego is like, well, I can say this, and how could that person say that? And you notice that it starts to like take you right in a spiral, and it really like kind of like it messes with you, right? And it's like it jars your like your security, and it just triggers all these pieces in you. So what we usually do is our ego will attach to it. You know, we might talk to a few people like, oh my God, can you believe what this person said? You know, and we go off on that tangent, which is connected to our mind. So what the self-pleasure practice, which I've found it's really, really useful for, is during those times of the day when you have these experiences that kind of that startle you or send you into a moment, or like are really, really intense, and you can't feel them right then because you're in the middle of, you know, at the grocery store in the checkout line, or maybe you're at work, or maybe you're with your children and you're making dinner. What I do is I go to my practice later that night, and I bring myself, I set my timer, I start my music, and I bring myself back to that specific moment through at that time when I received that text message, or when I had that incident during the day. And I specifically, so I will mentally recreate it in my mind so that I can start feeling the sensations in my body of what happened in my body when I received that message. And so I'll go back. And so that helps your nervous system to process what you couldn't process during the day because of the circumstances in the day. Because what we do, again, like we go through the day, we shove everything down. At the end of the day, we just go to bed, and it's like, okay, everything's going to be fine. And we have all this unprocessed shit that's in our nervous system that just sits there, and then it builds up. So if you can bring this into your practice. I use this a lot as a mom parenting. You know, I'll have incidents where I'll, you know, get into arguments with my daughters. You know, we'll get into fights, and, you know, things will be challenging, and I'll lose my shit, you know, and I'll do things that I have a lot of guilt around. I have a lot of shame around, and, you know, it'll really shake me, but I can't process it then because we have to get out the door, and I have to get them to school, and I have to start my day. And so I will bring myself back at the end of the day. I'll make a point to bring myself back at the practice. I'll close my eyes, I put on the right music, and I bring myself and I recreate that experience. And if I have to cry, then I can cry, right? And then I feel the sensations that are moving in my body, like at that moment. And so then I can process it. And that's expanding the capacity of your nervous system to hold these sensations in your body, so that the next few times when that situation happens, it will come more to my body, and I'll feel it in my body first, and then I'll be able to pause. Because like I said, when we have change comes from the body, it doesn't come from the mind. So there's so many times, using the example of my daughters, where it's like, oh, like I know that I'm in a power struggle with my daughter. I know what I should be doing, but emotionally, I'm not able to stop myself from reacting. But the more you're able to feel the sensations of what that feels like, and expand and hold that in your body, the next time that situation presents itself, you can feel it in your body more because you've been there and you've actually given your body space to feel it. So you know what it's like, and then you don't go immediately to the brain, and you don't go immediately to reacting. So that's a really powerful, powerful piece. I think that's like one of the most powerful pieces of the practice. Another piece that you can use in the practice is to connect to different parts of your body. So you can start to connect to your heart, right? You can connect from, you know, from your genitals to your heart, and you can focus on, you know, breathing and connecting and touching those two areas and circulating the energy. That can be like one practice, right? That you can write up for like a client, and that can be one practice. You can also do different practices that have different types of touch. So, you know, it's a really, really light touch, you know, touching your body. in places you've never touched before with a very light touch, and experimenting what it feels like then to get harder and touch a little bit with a little bit more force and with a little bit more energy. You can use it to also embody like a different archetype of yourself, right? So if you're wanting to step into, say you're queen or you're king or more of a warrior, and you're in a certain situation and you're struggling with the situation, you can turn your music on, set your intention for that practice, and because it all goes back to the intention. So you set your intention for the practice, and you can embody that archetype. For a while, I was embodying like my inner man, and I was like imagining Ragnar Lothbrok. and like I was like Ragnar Lothbrok and I were like we were like lovers, and he was like, part of me, and like I was like embodying that, right? So that's another way that you can bring that into the self-pleasure practice, is by intentionally bringing these different archetypes and these different feelings and embodying them. And how would you move in that sensation? How would you move in that archetype? What would it feel like to be in that archetype, and really staying in that place? You can use it to, you can also use it to make a decision. So if you're stuck, between two decisions, you can set the intention for your practice, set the timer, and you can feel what it feels like if you make this decision, right? Bring yourself to that decision, bring yourself to the outcome of that decision. Like, what does that feel like in your body? Where do you feel that? What do you need to move? What do you need to, what sound do you need to let out? What, maybe there's shame, whatever emotions might come from this decision. Fear, what does that fear feel like? And then you can bring yourself, you can cut it, like energetically cut a cord there from that decision, and then bring the next decision. And okay, so now how do I feel with this decision? And again, the aim is not to like, because you don't want to be, it's not like goal focused. Like, the aim is not to make the decision. The aim is to feel the sensations of what either one of these decisions might feel like to you, so that you can become more intimate with, how your body would feel in these sensations. And I forgot to mention this in the beginning, we use the tantric tools of sound, breath, movement, and touch throughout the self-pleasure practice. So you're continually going back and asking yourself, okay, how does my body need to move? Where do I need to touch myself? What sound do I need to make? And it can go from, your practice can go from, embodying this pleasure and touching yourself, to all of a sudden you feel like crying. And so then you're crying, and then you're, hitting a pillow, and you're kicking something because you have to move energy through. And so in that relationship, you start to notice what your body is intuitively telling you that you need to do, and then you respond to it by listening to it and doing it. And by giving yourself that space, wherever you have, arranged it, then you're listening to your intuition and your wisdom, and you're allowing that to come through, so that it becomes louder during the day. Like, essentially the self-pleasure practice is like, it's like 30 minutes of like connecting to your life force and connecting to your Eros energy, and moving through what needs, seeing what needs to move through, and, and bringing that out and moving it through in any way, using those tools that you can, any way that, intuitively comes to you. So the spectrum of the practices can be from like very open and very like intuitive, where you just kind of see what comes, right, to a much more of maybe like a structured approach, where you're trying to process an emotion, you're trying to process an experience, depending on like what perhaps you're trying, if you're working with a client, if you're trying to you know, help them to embody a different part of themselves. What do they need to connect to more? You know, what does it look like for them to surrender? What would it mean for, how would it feel for them to surrender? What does surrender mean to them? And that can be like a practice that you can lead them through, as far as like, you know, getting to know that surrender a little bit more intimately. You can also use it for sex magic, right? To, you know, to bring about the pleasure, and right before you, you come to orgasm, then you can connect to, you know, an intention or something that you want to manifest. So self-pleasure can also be used in that sense. You can also do de-armoring in self-pleasure. And like other emotional release techniques during self-pleasure, depending on what might come up. The other things I've used it for also is like cutting energetic cords and cutting energetic ties that I no longer want to be connected to. So I'll also use that time and that practice for that as well. Let's see, anything else? Yeah, so, you know, to speak to like the patterns that come up, right? So the patterns that come up, you'll start to notice. I think that if you, in the beginning, when you start practicing, if you don't have a set practice, that somebody doesn't give you a set practice, it's very hard to hold space for yourself when it's very just kind of like intuitive. Because there's, what I find comes up is a lot of insecurities, and like people are unsure if they're doing the practice right. Now, if somebody is in that space where they're feeling unsure that they're doing whether or not they're doing the practice right, that's the practice. And that becomes the practice, right? So what does it feel like when you don't do things right? And how does that feel in your body? And, you know, guiding them through that. So it's really, it's not a like, it doesn't follow like a linear process, and it's very much about like continually showing up, and very much like a meditation, like just showing up and seeing what comes up in that space that you're given, with the guidance. Now, what I talked about, like holding space, so, and those patterns, like I did notice in the beginning, and I do fall into a routine. Like I have one playlist that I like a lot, you know, and I'll find myself like, I'll put that playlist on, I'll lay down on my back, and I'm like, and I'm like, okay, and I'll go right into my normal pattern. And so again, that's the practice, right? Okay, you're in your pattern. So how can you disrupt this pattern? Let's put on a different playlist. Oh, but I don't want to put on the other playlist. And it's like, no, we're going to do that. We're going to try something different, and just like stick, you know, moving through that piece. Like what's coming up right now? Okay, there's a lot of resistance coming up. Okay, what is this resistance around? This resistance is around change. Why are we resisting change today? Like, what does this feel like in our body today? Right? And so that then becomes the practice. Questions, thoughts? Yeah.
When you're realizing what happens with your body,
Mm-hmm.
then what are you doing with that? What's the next step?
Okay, so that's great. So when you're in the practice and you're noticing that something is happening with your body, then you can use, you can touch if your body feels intuitively drawn to touch that space. Perhaps you can breathe into it more, and you can, if you breathe into those sensations, you can actually like expand those sensations and make them like they essentially feel bigger in your body, and you can really go deeper into that feeling. Like it's like a crevice that opens with the breath, those sensations, and you can open it, and then you can go in further and kind of see what else is there. And it's like a curiosity. And as you go in deeper, notice then, like if you're going back to your mind, because you might pop right back into your mind. And then just like trying to kind of stay there. Usually I use my hands when I'm moving my hands. It helps me to like stay connected there. And then you go in further and you see what else is there. You might have, you know, an emotion that comes up when you go deeper. You might feel a need to cry. You might feel a need to, you know, to scream or to bring some sound to it. It might be, sometimes I've had experiences where I've been like, holy shit, like it's like a wow moment, and it's like an explosive feeling of sensations in my body, almost like a release. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting. And so, yeah, so it's just about staying with that sensations. The sensations don't last for very long. It's usually like 90, probably like 90 seconds to maybe like 3 minutes, maybe. They don't last for very long. And so you just stay with them for as long as you can and bring yourself back to them. And then perhaps maybe you need to move. Yeah. So those are the ways that you can like play with the sensations. That's a great question. Thank you for asking that.
And then is this for the purpose of just letting it go?
So it could be letting it go, or it could be feeling it to the fullest capacity that your body can feel the sensation.
Okay.
So it's really like a processing piece.
Okay. I think the reason for that question is when you first said, if you're having a day and there's stress and you can't process it right then. So the first thing you said you can do is do it later and go back to that space and feel your body and think about it. And so that makes me feel like, okay, well, we're trying to let this go. We're not trying to repress it anymore. We're trying to get rid of it. So that's where that came from.
Yeah. And by feeling it, by actually feeling the sensation, you are processing it. So in a sense, like, I don't know if you ever really like get rid of it, but by feeling it, you're just actually feeling it. And so that's the piece, that's the healing piece that we lack throughout the day because we're running around leading with our mind. And we don't have the time to sit and to feel. So the feeling is the healing piece. Yeah, feeling the sensations.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Let me just see my notes here. It's also a really good practice. You can use like when we talk about like communication and boundaries, you can also bring that also into the practice, because you can, like I said, when we were talking about like the decisions that you have to make, or, you know, what does it feel like, you know, when somebody placed a boundary on you, or what does it feel like for you to place a new boundary on somebody else? And you can also kind of like feel through the dynamics of that as well. So that's another thing that you can use. So I have a little, if you're watching the recording, and I have a little sheet that's like a very basic, I can share it with you here. Let me see where it is. I have a very, no, that's not it. Hold on. It's like a little PDF that can guide you. And Jody, I can send it to you. Oh, here it is. Okay. I can actually drop it in the chat here and you guys can take a look. And then if you're watching the recording, then you'll get this when you watch the recording. But this is just a very basic kind of explanation as to how you can start the process. So by number one, closing your eyes, taking a few breaths, following the breaths in and out of your body. You can start by placing a hand on your body where you feel the most sensations. And again, this is a good one right here, number 3, like try not to attach any meaning to the sensations and emotions that arise. So a lot of times when we start to feel something, it'll be like, oh, you know, that's my abandonment wound, or that I feel that because of XYZ. And like your question, Jody, what you asked about, which was, you know, how do we, are we trying to let them go? Like the feeling of them, by feeling them, we're not making sense out of them. Like we're just feeling them. And once we start to attach like any story to that feeling, then we're back in our mind. And so it's back about redirecting it to your body. And so it's a constant, like with a meditation practice, right? With a meditation practice, it's not like how many times, how long did I say my mantra for, right? In meditation, it's how many times did I redirect myself? Did I get to that aha moment? I'm not on my mantra and I brought myself back. So it's the same thing in the self-pleasure modality. It's not like how long did I stay connected to my body? It's okay, how many times did I recognize I'm in my mind and I redirected myself back to my body? And so it's that redirection that is you're disrupting that pattern and you're reprogramming. And also celebrating yourself when you bring yourself back. Continue journeying with sound, breath, movement, and touch, allowing whatever to arise. Again, redirecting yourself back to your body. And allow your body to direct where and what needs to happen. And remember that there's no wrong way to do this. So the other piece that's also great is to journal after you do a self-pleasure practice, like to journal about what came up, to journal around, like that's more of the time you can do like a journal dump, or you can journal specific things and pieces that came up. And that might be more of the time to connect the sensations to, you know, thoughts or stories if you want to make connections and unpack something. The journaling time is a great time to do that, not when you're actually in the practice. Okay. Any other questions, you guys? So part of this, I was going to do a little demonstration, and part of the demonstration is, so I want to, before I started, I just want to talk about like how to set up your space and how to prepare your space. So it's good to have like a space that you come to every day to practice, because when you have a specific space that you come to every day, there's less chances of resistance because your mind likes to know where it's going to be next. So when you're setting yourself up more for success when you do have your space. So you want to set your space up. You want to have a timer to set the timer for 30 minutes, some music, some different playlists that you might have, or playlists that you might find, or just randomly playing, music that you like. But the point is to not necessarily, again, become attached to the music. And there's different music that you can pick for different experiences. If you want to go into what I didn't talk about, which is also another one, is to go into like an inner child practice where you can journey that. And maybe you want something that's a little bit more tender, right? Versus maybe if you're feeling like a lot of intensity and a lot of anger moving through, maybe you want something like that's a little bit more, has a little bit more energy. So, kind of pick the music, or maybe you have a mix of a little bit of everything. And then maybe if you want to, do some incense, kind of put on your oils. And then I usually like to have a massage oil with me. So you can bring that as well. Yeah. So that's like a good space to set up. So I'm not going to record the demonstration. So I'm going to stop the recording. And if you're watching this and you are watching the recording and you're curious about the demonstration, you're more than welcome to message me and we can set something up. So I appreciate if you're watching the recording and taking the time to be here. And I'm going to go ahead and stop that.